How's it going, folks? Stu here. There's definitely been a noticeable trend recently in filmmakers giving their ode to cinema in their films. I mean, we've just had Damien Chazelle's big, excessive, outrageous Babylon. We had Sam Mendes's whatever he thought he was doing with Empire of Light, and now we've got one from one of cinema's all-time great directors. No, I'm not talking about Neil Breen's latest film. We've got a little while to go for that one. It's everyone's favorite man. He's so good, and I also wish he was my granddad filmmaker, Steven Spielberg. And I guess I shouldn't act surprised or shocked that Spielberg's been the one that's come out and delivered the most charming and perhaps most effective of these kind of ode to cinemas. But yet again, he's made a film which fronts itself as a nice big warm hug, but then as you peel back the layers, is filled with not warm hugs. Is that the best analogy you'll hear for a Spielberg film ever? It's not my place to say. So The Fabelmans, as I said, directed by Steven Spielberg. I don't need to explain who that man is. He's Steven Spielberg. And it is a clearly very personal, sort of semi-autobiographical coming-of-age film about a boy growing up in a family with filmmaking as his sort of tool to get through all of the things that are happening within the relationships of the family and all of the things that you learn growing up as a young man. Right off the bat, this is unsurprisingly a supremely charming film. There's something about Spielberg's aesthetic and sensibilities as a director which just very quickly disarms you. I think there's a sort of growing tendency to look at Spielberg as a filmmaker, particularly with his more recent films versus his older, I guess, more universally acclaimed classics, as a kind of overly sentimental, kind of glossy sheen of a director. And that's definitely an aspect of his films, no doubt. He's got a very classic approach to storytelling, and no one moves us through scenes quite like Spielberg. But where a lot of people would use that sort of sentimentality in his films against him as a critique, I think it's kind of unarguable that he's using that intentionally to mine a lot more complex and deeper thoughts in his films. And Fabelmans is no different, and perhaps one of the more, I guess, emotionally rich films we've seen from him as of late. Like his best films, he uses all of the tools in his toolbox to create a really kind of charming and heartwarming tone, but then simultaneously contrasts that with actual, real, more complex emotions. You think back to things like E.T., where he used a very cute, adorable alien sci-fi story to tell a more deeper look at a fragmented family going through a divorce. With Fabelmans, he has a very similar kind of contrast between nice, charming, heartwarming sentimentality and kind of darker, sadder things going on behind the scenes. And I think it works really well as a coming-of-age film for that. It's balancing a look at filmmaking and creating things and the process and the art behind cinema with a young man's kind of growing it through life and the family dynamics that are around him. I found it to be a really kind of sincere and effective working through and processing of what it means to be a child in a family where people are moving away from each other, where people's emotions are changing. And leave it to someone like Spielberg to be able to mine something like that really effectively from this kind of ode to cinema, big behind the scenes look at filmmaking as a process. And I think that's something that I really appreciate about this versus some of our other filmmakers' films about film as of late. This film feels a bit less about cinema as this grand idealism and more about the actual process of making films and what that means to people and how you can use that to get through certain complex emotions as you're growing up. I love the things this film ends up saying about the process of filmmaking versus the end product of a film. Some really effective and interesting themes about what it means to manufacture something that isn't telling the truth but is giving the illusion of truth. The look at editing in this film, I think, was a really welcome addition and made for some of the most interesting scenes in the film. The way that you can cut out certain things and create something as an ideal that you want to show someone, or the way that two different people can look at something and feel that they're different truths to each of them. I think it's such an interesting concept and something which gets glossed over sometimes with these big kind of cinema was great films. There is a genuine attempt in this film from Spielberg to go a bit deeper into what it means to make things and what it means to create art that doesn't just fall into that kind of generic cinema as escapism themes that a lot of these films tend to fall back into. And of course, Spielberg, being the director he is, makes for an incredibly engaging and entertaining look at the filmmaking process outside of the deeper themes in the film. Watching Sammy as a kid here learn how to kind of cheat things in film and create film is just never not entertaining in the film. I loved watching him create his war film and the little tricks like having someone step on a plank to throw dirt up behind you. I don't know what it is about those little things that really do make me feel like I was younger and when I used to make videos when I was little. I think any creative watching this film will really engage with stuff like that and just find it so charming for that, because we've all been there trying to make something completely nonsensical and stupid with like the earliest camera we can find in the house. But it's a way that that's used so effortlessly and fluidly with the coming of age story that makes for such an engaging and emotionally resonant film, and that's helped out in no small part by the performances. Everyone's doing great stuff in this film. The standout for me has to be Gabriel LaBelle, who plays Sammy. There isn't a scene of this thing where I wasn't just completely engaged with his performance. He brings this genuine kind of earnestness and charm to the role, which I think just works perfectly and makes for an incredibly engaging central character to be following through this coming of age story. But the parents in the film, played by Paul Dano and Michelle Williams, doing great stuff as well. I think there's a tendency with their performances to feel a little bit more theatrical and over the top, but there's a reason for that, I think, in the film, and it works effectively to mine certain things out of scenes. I liked the heightenedness overall, but I think for some people that might come off as a little bit too much, a little bit over the top, and I've certainly heard that about people like Michelle Williams' performance in the film. But I think the characters and the relationships in the film hold true and really are what makes for such an emotionally resonant film. And it's filled with those kind of magical Spielberg moments, which we just come to expect from his films, which I think some people, you know, with a cynical mind start getting a bit annoyed at, but you guys are wrong. Those moments where the exact camera movement lines up with that exact musical note, that lines up with that exact performance and the exact lighting. I don't know how to describe it other than just it's pure Spielberg. And I love the way that this film ends up ending and the places it ends up going to. It doesn't end, I guess, in the conventional cliche way you'd expect a film about cinema to end. You know what I'm talking about. We've got a lot of films where the climax of the film will involve the lead character sat watching a film in a cinema, and then we've got a shot of the projector. We've got a shot of the character crying. We see an old film, which everyone goes, oh yeah, I remember that film, it was good. When that happens in films, I do tend to sort of clock out a little bit at this point, and I'm happy that Spielberg kind of subverts the way we expect a story like this to end. And I think there's an aspect of that which kind of feels a little bit like he's cutting the film short, but I do end up really appreciating the way that he does do that in a really effective and charming way. It's a really great note to end this film on, and it just happens to have one of the best cameos I've seen in a film in recent years in. There are a few moments in the film which I think do sort of threaten to go a little bit too far in that kind of heightened theatricality, having just said that I think the theatricality and heightenedness works on the whole, but I do think there are moments which did threaten to take me out of it a little bit, and I think the kind of surprise and subvertive moments in the film can sometimes undercut the things you think the film's going for, and that makes for a sometimes momentarily jarring feel while you're watching it. And I also think that there are character threads in the film which I didn't particularly love as much as others. I think someone like Seth Rogen in the film, I thought he was good, but I don't know, I just feel like there could have been a bit more from that character, or that I expect a little bit more from that character and performance. But I think there is definitely a big trend in films about films, and I think it was just great to see a director as accomplished and so wonderfully great as Spielberg giving a slightly different look at the filmmaking process. But what about you guys? Have you had a chance to check out The Fabelmans yet? It's out over here in UK cinemas on Friday. I believe it's been out in the States for a little while, so let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. We'll have a little chat. As usual, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see me talk about more shit, go ahead and click subscribe. Buttons down there for that, as well as my socials, my letterbox. I'll see you guys soon for some more thoughts on more films, but until next time, don't act like you don't know what I mean. We all want Spielberg as a granddad. It's just a unanimous thing, right?